Hello, my friend. Welcome to the Sleepy Archive. I'm so glad you're here. How was your day today? Tonight, we travel back nearly 3,000 years to the windswept shore of a dark and ancient sea, to a poem so vast, so profoundly human, that it has never, in all the centuries since its first telling, stopped being read. The Iliad, attributed to the blind poet Homer. It is the oldest epic poem in the Western world, composed perhaps as far back as the 8th century, before the Common Era, passed down for generations by memory alone, recited by traveling singers at fires and festivals. Before anyone thought to write it down, the story begins, not at the start of the Trojan War, but deep within its 10th and final year. The Greek armies have camped on the shores of Troy for a decade. The war has grown old and heavy, like smoke that lingers long after the fire has passed. At the center of everything stand one man, Achilles, the greatest warrior the Greeks have ever known. Swift, terrible, and proud. And the Iliad is the story of his anger. Make yourself comfortable. Let the weight of the day settle quietly away from your shoulders. Let your breathing find its own slow rhythm, and allow the ancient world to rise gently before you. Welcome to the Sleepy Archive. Tonight, we open one of the oldest and most mysterious books ever written. Close your eyes now. Let the weight of the day begin to lift. Take a slow, deep breath in and out. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw soften. Let your hands rest open at your sides. You are about to be carried back 3,000 years to the windswept plains before the walls of Troy, to a world of gods and heroes, of honor and grief, of golden dawn breaking over a wine-dark sea. Tonight we enter the Iliad, the oldest war poem of the Western world, the work of Homer, the blind poet of ancient Greece, composed perhaps as early as the 8th century before Christ, and sung aloud in firelit halls long before a single word was written down. The Iliad does not begin at the beginning of the Trojan War, nor does it end at its close. It sings of a single thread, wound tight with fate, the wrath of one man, Achilles, swiftest of the Greeks, and the terrible unraveling that followed from his anger. The story unfolds in the 10th year of the siege. The Greek ships have been beached upon the shore for a decade. Troy's great walls, built by the gods themselves, still stand, and the army of Agamemnon, high king of the Greeks, grows weary in the long campaign. In this world, the gods walk among men. Zeus watches from his throne upon Olympus. Hera and Athena favor the Greeks. Apollo and Aphrodite shield the Trojans. And the fates of mortals are woven on a loom none can see. Alexander Pope gave the Iliad new life in his magnificent verse translation, first published in 1715, and it is his poetry you will hear tonight, stately and musical, with the rolling rhythm of heroic couplets, each paired line chiming like a bell struck in a stone hall. Let the verses carry you. Let the images rise slowly behind your eyes like ancient frescoes emerging from golden walls. The gleam of bronze armor in morning sun, the creak of oarwood on salt water, a woman standing at a tower, watching the plain below, two old men speaking quietly of things already lost. You need not follow every name, every twist of battle. Simply let the poem wash over you like waves on a shore. The music of it, the breath of it, the deep antiquity of it. Close your eyes now and let Homer sing. Book I, the quarrel of Achilles and Agamemnon. Achilles' wrath to grease the direful spring of woes unnumbered. Heavenly goddess, sing that wrath which hurled to Pluto's gloomy reign the souls of mighty chiefs untimely slain, whose limbs unbared on the naked shore, devouring dogs and hungry vultures tore. Since great Achilles and Atrides strove, such was the sovereign doom, and such the will of Jove. Declare, O Muse, in what ill-fated hour sprung the fierce strife? From what offended power Latona's son a dire contagion spread, and heaped the camp with mountains of the dead? The king of men his reverent priest defied, and for the king's offense the people died. For Chryses sought with costly gifts to gain his captive daughter from the victor's chain. Suppliant the venerable father stands. Apollo's awful ensigns grace his hands. By these he begs, and lowly bending down, extends the scepter and the laurel crown. He sued to all, but chief implored for grace the brother kings of Atreus' royal race. Ye kings and warriors, may your vows be crowned, and Troy's proud walls lie level with the ground. May Jove restore you when your toils are o'er safe to the pleasures of your native shore. But oh, relieve a wretched parent's pain, and give Chryses to these arms again. If mercy fail, yet let my presence move, and dread avenging Phoebus, son of Jove. The Greeks in shouts their joint assent declare, the priest to reverence, and release the fair. Not so Atrides, he, with kingly pride, repulsed the sacred sire, and thus replied, Hence on thy life, and fly these hostile plains, nor ask, presumptuous, what the king detains. Hence, with thy laurel crown and golden rod, nor trust too far those ensigns of thy God. Mine is thy daughter, priest, and shall remain, and prayers and tears and bribes shall plead in vain, till time shall rifle every youthful grace, and age dismiss her from my cold embrace. In daily labors of the loom employed, or doomed to deck the bed she once enjoyed. Hence then, to Argos shall the maid retire, far from her native soil and weeping sire. The trembling priest along the shore returned, and in the anguish of a father mourned. Disconsolate, not daring to complain, silent he wandered by the sounding main, till, safe at distance, to his God he prays, the God who darts around the world his rays. O Smintheus, sprung from fair Latona's line, thou guardian power of Scylla the divine, thou source of light, whom Tenedos adores, and whose bright presence gilds thy Chrysis shores. If e'er with wreaths I hung thy sacred fane, or fed the flames with fat of oxen slain, God of the silver bow, thy shafts employ, avenge thy servant, and the Greeks destroy. Thus Chryses prayed, the favoring power attends, and from Olympus' lofty tops descends. Bent was his bow, the Grecian hearts to wound, fierce as he moved, his silver shafts resound. Breathing revenge, a sudden night he spread, and gloomy darkness rolled about his head. The fleet in view, he twanged his deadly bow, and hissing fly the feathered fates below. On mules and dogs the infection first began, and last the vengeful arrows fixed a man. For 9 long nights, through all the dusky air, the pyres, thick flaming, shot a dismal glare. But ere the 10th revolving day was run, inspired by Juno, Thetis' godlike son convened to counsel all the Grecian train. For much the goddess mourned her heroes slain. The assembly seated, rising o'er the rest, Achilles thus the king of men addressed. Why leave we not the fatal Trojan shore, and measure back the seas we crossed before? The plague destroying whom the sword would spare. 'Tis time to save the few remains of war. But let some prophet, or some sacred sage, explore the cause of great Apollo's rage. or learn the wasteful vengeance to remove by mystic dreams, for dreams descend from Jove. If broken vows this heavy curse have laid, let altars smoke and hecatombs be paid. So heaven, atoned, shall dying Greece restore, and Phoebus dart his burning shafts no more. He said, and sat, when Calchas thus replied, Calchas the wise, the Grecian priest and guide, that sacred seer, whose comprehensive view, the past, the present, and the future knew, uprising slow, the venerable sage thus spoke the prudence and the fears of age. Beloved of Jove, Achilles, wouldst thou know why angry Phoebus bend his fatal bow? First give thy faith, and plight a prince's word of sure protection, by thy power and sword. For I must speak what wisdom would conceal, and truths, invidious to the great, reveal. Bold is the task, when subjects, grown too wise, instruct a monarch where his error lies. For though we deem the short-lived fury past, 'tis sure the mighty will revenge at last. To whom Pelides, from my inmost soul speak what thou knowst, and speak without control. E'en by that God I swear who rules the day, to whom thy hands the vows of Greece convey, and whose blessed oracles thy lips declare. Long as Achilles breathes this vital air, no daring Greek, of all the numerous band, against his priest shall lift an impious hand. Not e'en the chief by whom our hosts are led, the King of kings, shall touch that sacred head. Encouraged thus, the blameless man replies, nor vows unpaid, nor slighted sacrifice, but he, our chief, provoked the raging pest, Apollo's vengeance for his injured priest. Nor will the gods' awakened fury cease, but plagues shall spread, and funeral fires increase, till the great king, without a ransom paid, to her own crisis send the black-eyed maid. Perhaps, with added sacrifice and prayer, the priest may pardon, and the god may spare. The prophet spoke, when with a gloomy frown the monarch started from his shining throne. Black choler filled his breast that boiled with ire, and from his eyeballs flashed the living fire. Augur accursed, denouncing mischief still, prophet of plagues, forever boding ill. Still must that tongue some wounding message bring, and still thy priestly pride provoke thy king? For this are Phoebus' oracles explored, to teach the Greeks to murmur at their lord. For this with falsehood is my honor stained, is heaven offended, and a priest profaned, because my prize, my beauteous maid, I hold, and heavenly charms prefer to proffer gold? A maid, unmatched in manners as in face, skilled in each art, and crowned with every grace. Not half so dear were Clytemnestra's charms, when first her blooming beauties bless my arms. Yet, if the gods demand her, let her sail. Our cares are only for the public weal. Let me be deemed the hateful cause of all, and suffer rather than my people fall. The prize, the beauteous prize, I will resign, so dearly valued, and so justly mine. But since for common good I yield the fair, my private loss let grateful Greece repair. Nor unrewarded let your prince complain, that he alone has fought and bled in vain. Insatiate king, Achilles thus replies, fond of the power, but fonder of the prize. Wouldst thou the Greeks their lawful prey should yield, the due reward of many a well-fought field? The spoils of cities razed and warriors slain, we share with justice, as with toil we gain. But to resume whatever thy avarice craves, that trick of tyrants, may be borne by slaves. Yet if our chief for plunder only fight, the spoils of Ilion shall thy loss requite. Weener, by Jove's decree, our conquering power shall humble to the dust our lofty towers. Then thus the king, shall I my prize resign with tame content, and thou possessed of thine? Great as thou art, and like a god in fight, think not to rob me of a soldier's right. At thy demand shall I restore the maid. First let the just equivalent be paid, such as a king might ask, and let it be a treasure worthy her, and worthy me. Or grant me this, or with a monarch's claim this hand shall seize some other captive dame. The mighty Ajax shall his prize resign, Ulysses' spoils, or even thy own, be mine. The man who suffers loudly may complain, and rage he may, but he shall rage in vain. But this when time requires. It now remains we launch a bark to plow the watery plains, and waft a sacrifice to Chrysa's shores, with chosen pilots, and with laboring oars. Soon shall the sable ship ascend, and some deputed prince the charge attend. This Creta's king, or Ajax shall fulfill, or wise Ulysses see performed our will. Or, if our royal pleasure shall ordain, Achilles' self-conduct her o'er the main. Let fierce Achilles, dreadful in his rage, the god propitiate, and the pest assuage. At this, Pelides, frowning stern, replied, O tyrant, armed with insolence and pride, inglorious slave to interest, ever joined with fraud, unworthy of a royal mind, what generous Greek, obedient to thy word, shall form an ambush, or shall lift the sword? What cause have I to war at thy decree? The distant Trojans never injured me. To Phthyia's realms no hostile troops they led. Safe in her valleys my warlike coursers fed, far hence removed, the horse resounding mane, and walls of rocks secure my native reign, whose fruitful soil luxuriant harvests grace, rich in her fruits and in her martial race. Hither we sailed, a voluntary throng, to avenge a private, not a public wrong. What else to Troy the assembled nations draws, but thine, ungrateful, and thy brother's cause? Is this the pay our blood and toils deserve, disgraced and injured by the man we serve? And darest thou threat to snatch my prize away, due to the deeds of many a dreadful day? A prize is small, O tyrant, matched with thine, as thy own actions if compared to mine. Thine in each conquest is the wealthy prey, though mine the sweat and danger of the day. Some trivial present to my ships I bear, or barren praises pay the wounds of war. But know, proud monarch, I'm thy slave no more. My fleet shall waft me to Thessalia's shore, left by Achilles on the Trojan plain. What spoils, what conquests shall Atrides gain? To this the king, fly, mighty warrior, fly, thy aid we need not, and thy threats defy. There want not chiefs in such a cause to fight, and Jove himself shall guard a monarch's right. Of all the kings, the gods distinguished care, to power superior none such hatred bear. Strife and debate thy restless soul employ, and wars and horrors are thy savage joy. If thou hast strength, 'twas heaven that strength bestowed. For know, vain man, thy valor is from God. Haste, launch thy vessels, fly with speed away, rule thy own realms with arbitrary sway. I heed thee not, but prize at equal rate thy short-lived friendship and thy groundless hate. Go, threat thy earth-born myrmidons, but here 'tis mine to threaten, prince, and thine to fear. No, if the god the beauteous dame demand, my bark shall waft her to her native land. But then prepare, imperious prince, prepare, fierce as thou art, to yield thy captive fair. Even in thy tent I'll seize the blooming prize, thy loved Briseis with the radiant eyes. Hence shalt thou prove my might, and curse the hour thou stoodst a rival of imperial power. And hence, to all our hosts it shall be known, that kings are subject to the gods alone. Achilles heard, with grief and rage oppressed, his heart swelled high, and labored in his breast. Distracting thoughts by turns his bosom ruled, now fired by wrath, and now by reason cooled, that prompts his hand to draw the deadly sword, force through the Greeks, and pierce their haughty lord. This whispers soft as vengeance to control, and calm the rising tempest of his soul. Just as in anguish of suspense he stayed, while half unsheathed appeared the glittering blade, Minerva swift descended from above, sent by the sister and the wife of Jove, for both the princes claimed her equal care. Behind she stood, and by the golden hair Achilles seized, to him alone confessed, a sable cloud concealed her from the rest. He sees, and sudden to the goddess cries, known by the flames that sparkle from her eyes. Minerva repressing the fury of Achilles. Descends Minerva, in her guardian care, a heavenly witness of the wrongs I bear from a true son. Then let those eyes that view the daring crime behold the vengeance too. Forbear, the progeny of Jove replies. To calm thy fury I forsake the skies. Let great Achilles, to the gods resigned, to reason yield the empire o'er his mind. By awful Juno this command is given. The king and you are both the care of heaven. The force of keen reproaches let him feel, but sheathe, obedient, thy revenging steel. For I pronounce, and trust a heavenly power, thy injured honor has its fated hour, when the proud monarch shall thy arms implore, and bribe thy friendship with a boundless store. Then let revenge no longer bear the sway. Command thy passions, and the gods obey. To her Pelides, with regardful ear, 'tis just, O goddess, by thy dictates here, hard as it is, my vengeance I suppress. Those who revere the gods will bless. He said, observant of the blue-eyed maid. Then in the sheath returned the shining blade. The goddess swift to high Olympus flies, and joins the sacred senate of the skies. Nor yet the rage his boiling breast forsook, which thus redoubling on Atrides broke. O monster, mixed of insolence and fear, thou dog in forehead, but in heart a deer, when wert thou known in ambushed fights to dare, or nobly face the horrid front of war? 'Tis ours, the chance of fighting fields to try, thine a look on, and bid the valiant die. So much 'tis safer through the camp to go, and rob a subject, than to spoil a foe. Scourge of thy people, violent and base, sent in Jove's anger on a slavish race, who, lost a sense of generous freedom past, are tamed to wrongs, or this had been thy last. Now by this sacred scepter hear me swear, which never more shall leaves or blossoms bear, which severed from the trunk, as I from thee, on the bare mountains left its parent tree. This scepter, formed by tempered steel, to prove an ensign of the delegates of Jove, from whom the power of laws and justice springs. Tremendous oath, inviolate to kings, by this I swear, when bleeding Greece again shall call Achilles, she shall call in vain. When, flushed with slaughter, Hector comes to spread the purpled shore with mountains of the dead, then shalt thou mourn the affront thy madness gave, forced to deplore when impotent to save, then rage and bitterness of soul to know this act has made the bravest Greek thy foe. He spoke, and furious hurled against the ground his scepter starred with golden studs around, then sternly silent sat. With like disdain the raging king returned his frowns again, to calm their passion with the words of age. Slow from his seat arose the Pylian sage, experienced Nestor, in persuasion skilled, words sweet as honey, from his lips distilled. 2 generations now had passed away, wise by his rules, and happy by his sway. 2 ages o'er his native realm he reigned, and now the example of the third remained. All viewed with awe the venerable man, who thus with mild benevolence began. What shame, what woe is this to Greece? What joy to Troy's proud monarch, and the friend of Troy, that adverse gods commit to stern debate the best, the bravest of the Grecian state. Young as ye are, this youthful heat restrain, nor think your Nestor's years and wisdom vain. A godlike race of heroes once I knew, such as no more these aged eyes shall view. Lives there achieved to match Pirithous' fame, Dryas the bold, Orsinius' deathless name, Theseus, endued with more than mortal might, or Polyphemus, like the gods in fight. With these of old, to toils of battle bred, in early youth my hardy days I led, fired with the thirst which virtuous envy breeds, and smit with love of honorable deeds, strongest of men. They pierced the mountain boar, ranged the wild deserts red with monsters' gore, and from their hills the shaggy centaurs tore. Yet these with soft persuasive arts I swayed. When Nestor spoke, they listened and obeyed. If in my youth, even these esteem me wise, do you young warriors hear my age advise? Atrides, seize not on the beauteous slave, that prize the Greeks by common suffrage gave. Nor thou, Achilles, treat our prince with pride. Let kings be just, and sovereign power preside. Thee, the first honors of the war adorn, like gods in strength, and of a goddess born, him awful majesty exalts above the powers of earth, and sceptered sons of Jove. Let both unite with well-consenting mind, so shall authority with strength be joined. Leave me, O king, to calm Achilles' rage. Rule thou thyself, as more advanced in age. Forbid it, gods. Achilles should be lost, the pride of Greece, and bulwark of our host. This said, he ceased. The king of men replies, Thy years are awful, and thy words are wise. But that imperious, that unconquered soul, no laws can limit, no respect control. Before his pride must his superiors fall, his word the law, and he the lord of all. Him must our hosts, our chiefs, ourself obey. What king can bear a rival in his sway? Grant that the gods his matchless force have given, has foul reproach a privilege from heaven. At this they ceased, the stern debate expired, the chiefs in sullen majesty retired. Achilles with Patroclus took his way where near his tents his hollow vessels lay. Meantime Atrides launched with numerous oars a well-rigged ship for Chrysa's sacred shores. High on the deck was fair Chryses placed, and sage Ulysses with a conduct graced. Safe in her sides the hecatomb they stowed, then swiftly sailing, cut the liquid road. The host to expiate next the king prepares, with pew lustrations, and with solemn prayers. Washed by the briny wave, the pious train are cleansed, and cast the ablutions in the main. Along the shore whole hecatombs were laid, and bulls and goats to Phoebus' altars paid. The sable fumes in curling spires arise, and waft their grateful odors to the skies. The army thus in sacred rites engaged, Atrides still with deep resentment raged. To wait his will 2 sacred heralds stood, Talthybius and Eurybates the good. Haste to the fierce Achilles' tent, he cries. Thence bear Briseis as our royal prize. Submit he must, or if they will not part, ourself in arms shall tear her from his heart. The unwilling heralds act their lord's commands. Pensive they walk along the barren sands. Arrived, the hero in his tent they find, with gloomy aspect on his arm reclined. At awful distance long they silent stand, loath to advance, and speak their hard command, decent confusion. This the godlike man perceived, and thus with accent mild began. With leave and honor enter our abodes, ye sacred ministers of men and gods. I know your message. By constraint you came, not you, But your imperious lord I blame. Patroclus, haste, the fair Briseis bring, conduct my captive to the haughty king. But witness, heralds, and proclaim my vow, witness to gods above, and men below. But first and loudest to your prince declare, that lawless tyrant whose commands you bear, unmoved as death Achilles shall remain, though prostrate Greece shall bleed at every vein. The raging chief in frantic passion lost, blind to himself, and useless to his host, unskilled to judge the future by the past, in blood and slaughter shall repent at last. The departure of Briseis from the tent of Achilles, Patroclus now the unwilling beauty brought. She, in soft sorrows, and in pensive thought, passed silent, as the heralds held her hand, and oft looked back, slow-moving o'er the strand. Not so his loss the fierce Achilles bore, but sad, retiring to the sounding shore. O'er the wild margin of the deep he hung, that kindred deep from whence his mother sprung, there bathed in tears of anger and disdain, thus loud lamented to the stormy main. O parent goddess, since in early bloom thy son must fall, by too severe a doom, sure to so short a race of glory born, great Jove in justice should this span adorn, honor and fame at least the thunderer owed, and ill he pays the promise of a god, if yon proud monarch thus thy son defies, obscures my glories, and resumes my prize. Far from the deep recesses of the main, where aged ocean holds his watery reign, the goddess mother heard the waves divide, and like a mist she rose above the tide, beheld him mourning on the naked shores, and thus the sorrows of his soul explores. Why grieves my son? Thy anguish let me share, reveal the cause, and trust a parent's care. He deeply sighing said, to tell my woe is but to mention what too well you know. From Thebe, sacred to Apollo's name, Aeacian's realm, our conquering army came, with treasure loaded and triumphant spoils, whose just division crowned the soldier's toils. But bright Chryses, heavenly prize, was led, by vote selected, to the general's bed. The priest of Phoebus sought by gifts to gain his beauteous daughter from the victor's chain. The fleet he reached, and, lowly bending down, held forth the scepter and the laurel crown, entreating all, but chief implored for grace the brother kings of Atreus' royal race. The generous Greeks their joint consent declare, the priest to reverence, and release the fair. Not so Atrides, he, with wonted pride, the sire insulted, and his gifts denied. The insulted sire, his god's peculiar care, too. Phoebus prayed, and Phoebus heard the prayer. A dreadful plague ensues. The avenging darts incessant fly, and pierce the Grecian hearts. A prophet then, inspired by heaven, arose, and points the crime, and thence derives the woes. Myself the first the assembled chiefs incline to avert the vengeance of the power divine. Then rising in his wrath, the monarch stormed. Incensed he threatened, and his threats performed. The fair Chryses to her sire was sent, with offered gifts to make the god relent. But now he sees Briseis' heavenly charms, and of my valor's prize defrauds my arms, defrauds the votes of all the Grecian train, and service, faith, and justice plead in vain. But goddess, thou thy suppliant son attend, to high Olympus' shining court ascend, urge all the ties to former service owed, and sue for vengeance to the thundering god. Oft hast thou triumphed in the glorious boast, that thou stoodst forth of all the ethereal host, when bold rebellion shook the realms above. The undaunted guard of cloud-compelling Jove, when the bright partner of his awful reign, the warlike maid, and monarch of the main, the traitor gods, by mad ambition driven, durst threat with chains the omnipotence of heaven. Then, called by thee, the monster Titan came, whom gods Briareus, men Aegean name, through wondering skies enormous stalked along. Not he that shakes the solid earth so strong, with giant pride at Jove's high throne he stands, and brandished round him all his 100 hands. The affrighted gods confessed their awful lord. They dropped the fetters, trembled, and adored. This goddess, this to his remembrance call, embrace his knees, at his tribunal fall, conjure him far to drive the Grecian train, to hurl them headlong to their fleet and main, to heap the shores with copious death, and bring the Greeks to know the curse of such a king. Let Agamemnon lift his haughty head o'er all his wide dominion of the dead, and mourn in blood that ere he durst disgrace the boldest warrior of the Grecian race. Thetis calling Briareus to the assistance of Jupiter. Unhappy son, fair Thetis thus replies, while tears celestial trickle from her eyes. Why have I borne thee with a mother's throes, to fates averse, and nursed for future woes? So short a space the light of heaven to view, so short a space, and filled with sorrow too. O might a parent's careful wish prevail, far, far from Ilion should thy vessel sail, and thou, from camps remote, the danger shun which now, alas, too nearly threats my son. Yet, what I can, to move thy suit, I'll go to great Olympus crowned with fleecy snow. Meantime, secure within thy ships, from far behold the field, not mingle in the war. The sire of gods and all the ethereal train, on the warm limits of the farthest main, now mix with mortals, nor disdain to grace the feasts of Ethiopia's blameless race. 12 days the powers indulge the genial rite, returning with the 12th revolving light. Then will I mount the brazen dome, and move the high tribunal of immortal Jove. The goddess spoke, the rolling waves unclose. Then down the steep she plunged from whence she rose, and left him sorrowing on the lonely coast, in wild resentment for the fair he lost. In Chrysa's port now sage Ulysses rode, beneath the deck the destined victim stowed. The sails they furled, they lashed the mast aside, and dropped their anchors, and the pinnace tied. Next on the shore their hecatomb they land, Chryses last descending on the strand. Her, thus returning from the furrowed main, Ulysses led to Phoebus' sacred fane, where at his solemn altar, as the maid he gave to Chryses, thus the hero said, Hail, reverend priest! To Phoebus' awful dome a suppliant I from great Atrides come, unransomed. Here receive the spotless fair, accept the hecatomb the Greeks prepare, and may thy God who scatters darts around, atone by sacrifice, desist to wound. At this, the sire embraced the maid again, so sadly lost, so lately sought in vain. Then near the altar of the darting king, disposed in rank their hecatomb they bring, with water purify their hands, and take the sacred offering of the salted cake, while thus with arms devoutly raised in air, and solemn voice, the priest directs his prayer. God of the silver bow, thy ear incline, whose power encircles Scylla the divine, whose sacred eye thy Tenedo surveys, and gilds fair Chrysa with distinguished rays. If, fire to vengeance at thy priest's request, thy direful darts inflict the raging pest, once more attend, avert the wasteful woe, and smile propitious, and unbend thy bow. So Chryses prayed. Apollo heard his prayer, and now the Greeks their hecatomb prepare. Between their horns the salted barley threw, and, with their heads to heaven, the victims slew. The limbs they sever from the enclosing hide, the thighs, selected to the gods, divide. On these, in double calls involved with art, the choicest morsels lay from every part. The priest himself before his altar stands, and burns the offering with his holy hands, pours the black wine, and sees the flames aspire. The youth with instruments surround the fire, the thighs thus sacrificed, and entrails dressed. The assistants part, transfix, and roast the rest, then spread the tables, the repast prepare. Each takes his seat, and each receives a share. When now the rage of hunger was repressed, with pure libations they conclude the feast. The youths with wine the copious goblets crowned, and, pleased, dispense the flowing bowls around. With hymns divine the joyous banquet ends. The paeans lengthen till the sun descends. The Greeks, restored, the grateful notes prolong. Apollo listens, and approves the song. 'Twas night, the chiefs beside their vessel lie, till rosy morn had purpled o'er the sky. Then launch, and hoist the mast. Indulgent gales, supplied by Phoebus, fill the swelling sails. The milk-white canvas bellying as they blow. The parted ocean foams and roars below. Above the bounding billows swift they flew, till now the Grecian camp appeared in view. Far on the beach they haul their bark to land. The crooked keel divides the yellow sand. Then part, where stretched along the winding bay, the ships in tents and mingled prospect lay. But raging still, amidst his navy sat the stern Achilles, steadfast in his hate, nor mixed in combat, nor in council joined, but wasting cares lay heavy on his mind. In his black thoughts revenge and slaughter roll, and scenes of blood rise dreadful in his soul. 12 days were past, and now the dawning light the gods had summoned to the Olympian height. Jove, first ascending from the watery bowers, leads the long order of ethereal powers. When, like the morning mist in early day, rose from the flood the daughter of the sea, and to the seats divine her flight addressed. There, far apart, and high above the rest, the Thunderer sat, where old Olympus shrouds his 100 heads in heaven, and props the clouds. Suppliant the goddess stood. One hand she placed beneath his beard, and one his knees embraced. If e'er, O Father of the gods, she said, my words could please thee, or my actions aid, some marks of honor on my son bestow, and paying glory what in life you owe. Fame is at least by heavenly promise due to life so short, and now dishonored too. Avenge this wrong, O ever just and wise. Let Greece be humbled, and the Trojans rise, till the proud king and all the Achaean race shall heap with honors him they now disgrace. Thetis entreating Jupiter to honor Achilles. Thus Thetis spoke, but Jove in silence held the sacred counsels of his breast concealed. Not so repulsed, the goddess closer pressed, still grasped his knees, and urged the dear request. O sire of gods and men, thy suppliant hear, refuse, or grant, for what is Jove to fear? Or declare, of all the powers above, is wretched Thetis least the care of Jove? She said, and, sighing, thus the god replies, who rolls the thunder o'er the vaulted skies. What hast thou asked? Why should Jove engage in foreign contests and domestic rage, the gods' complaints, and Juno's fierce alarms, while I, too partial, aid the Trojan arms? Go, lest the haughty partner of my sway with jealous eyes thy close access survey, but part in peace, secure thy prayer is sped, witness the sacred honors of our head, the nod that ratifies the will divine, the faithful, fixed, irrevocable sign. This seals thy suit, and this fulfills thy vows. He spoke, and awful bends his sable brows, shakes his ambrosial curls, and gives the nod, the stamp of fate and sanction of the god. High heaven with trembling the dread signal took, and all Olympus too. The center shook. Swift to the seas profound the goddess flies. Jove to his starry mansions in the skies. The shining synod of the immortals wait the coming god, and from their thrones of state arising silent, wrapped in holy fear, before the majesty of heaven appear. Trembling they stand, while Jove assumes the throne. All, but the god's imperious queen alone. Late had she viewed the silver-footed dame, and all her passions kindled into flame. Say, artful manager of heaven, she cries, who now partakes the secrets of the skies? Thy Juno knows not the decrees of fate, in vain the partner of imperial state. What favorite goddess then those cares divides, which Jove in prudence from his consort hides? To this the Thunderer, seek not thou to find the sacred counsels of Almighty Mind. Involved in darkness lies the great decree, nor can the depths of fate be pierced by thee. What fits thy knowledge? Thou the first shalt know, the first of gods above, and men below, but thou, nor they, shall search the thoughts that roll deep in the close recesses of my soul. Full on the sire, the goddess of the skies, rolled the large orbs of her majestic eyes, and thus returned. Austere Saturnius, say, from whence this wrath, or who controls thy sway? Thy boundless will, for me, remains in force, and all thy counsels take the destined course. But 'tis for Greece I fear, for late was seen, in close consult, the silver-footed queen. Jove to his Thetis nothing could deny, nor was the signal vain that shook the sky. What fatal favor has the goddess won, to grace her fierce, inexorable son? Perhaps in Grecian blood to drench the plain, and glut his vengeance with my people slain. Then thus the god, O restless fate of pride, that strives to learn what heaven resolves to hide. Vain is the search, presumptuous and abhorred, anxious to thee, and odious to thy lord. Let this suffice, the immutable decree no force can shake. What is, that ought to be. Goddess, submit, nor dare our will withstand, but dread the power of this avenging hand. The united strength of all the gods above in vain resists the omnipotence of Jove. The Thunderer spoke, nor durst the queen reply. A reverent horror silenced all the sky. The feast disturbed, with sorrow Vulcan saw his mother menaced, and the gods in awe, peace at his heart, and pleasure his design. Thus interposed the architect divine. The wretched quarrels of the mortal state are far unworthy, gods, of your debate. Let men their days in senseless strife employ. We, in eternal peace and constant joy. Thou, goddess mother, with our sire comply, nor break the sacred union of the sky, lest, roused to rage, he shake the blessed abodes, launch the red lightning, and dethrone the gods. If you submit, the Thunderer stands appeased. The gracious power is willing to be pleased. Thus Vulcan spoke, and rising with a bound, the double bowl with sparkling nectar crowned, which held the Juno in a cheerful way. Goddess, he cried, be patient and obey. Dear as you are, if Jove his arm extend, I can but grieve, unable to defend. What god so daring in your aid to move, or lift his hand against the force of Jove? Once in your cause I felt his matchless might, hurled headlong down from the ethereal height, tossed all the day in rapid circles round, nor till the sun descended touched the ground. Breathless I fell, in giddy motion lost. The Scythians raised me on the Lemnian coast, he said, and to her hands the goblet heaved, which, with a smile, the white-armed queen received then. To the rest he filled, and in his turn, each to his lips applied the nectared urn. Vulcan with awkward grace his office plies, and unextinguished laughter shakes the skies. Thus the blessed gods the genial day prolong, in feasts ambrosial and celestial song. Apollo, tune the lyre, the muses round with voice alternate aid the silver sound. Meantime the radiant sun to mortal sight, descending swift, rolled down the rapid light. Then to their starry domes the gods depart, the shining monuments of Vulcan's art. Jove on his couch reclined his awful head, and Juno slumbered on the golden bed. The poem moves now to Book 3. The oath between the armies, a moment of stillness before the storm. Book 3, the oath in single combat. Thus by their leader's care, each martial band moves into ranks and stretches o'er the land. With shouts the Trojans, rushing from afar, proclaim their motions and provoke the war. So when inclement winters vex the plain with piercing frosts or thick descending rain, to warmer seas the cranes embodied fly, with noise and order through the midway sky. To pygmy nations wounds and death they bring, and all the war descends upon the wing. But silent, breathing rage, resolve and skill by mutual aids to fix a doubtful field. Swift march the Greeks. The rapid dust around darkening arises from the labored ground. Thus from his flaggy wings, when notice sheds a night of vapors round the mountain heads, swift gliding mist the dusky fields invade, to thieves more grateful than the midnight shade, while scarce the swains their feeding flocks survey, lost and confused amidst the thickened day. So wrapped in gathering dust, the Grecian train, in moving cloud, swept on and hid the plain. Now front to front the hostile armies stand, eager of fight, and only wait command, when, to the van, before the sons of fame whom Troy sent forth, the beauteous Paris came, in form of God. The panther's speckled hide flowed o'er his armor with an easy pride, his bended bow across his shoulders flung, his sword beside him negligently hung. 2 pointed spears he shook with gallant grace, and dared the bravest of the Grecian race. As thus, with glorious air and proud disdain, he boldly stalked, the foremost on the plain, him Menelaus, loved of Mars, Espes, with heart elated, and with joyful eyes, so joys a lion, if the branching deer, or mountain goat, his bulky prize appear, eager he seizes and devours the slain, pressed by bold youths and baying dogs in vain. Thus fond of vengeance, with a furious bound, in clanging arms he leaps upon the ground from his high chariot. Him, approaching near, the beauteous champion views with marks of fear, smit with a conscious sense, retires behind, and shuns the fate he well deserved to find. As when some shepherd, from the rustling trees shot forth to view, a scaly serpent sees, trembling and pale, he starts with wild affright, and all confused precipitates his flight. So from the king the shining warrior flies, and plunged amid the thickest Trojans lies. As godlike Hector sees the prince retreat, he thus upbraids him with a generous heat. Unhappy Paris, but to women brave, so fairly formed, and only to deceive. Oh, hadst thou died when first thou saw'st the light, or died at least before thy nuptial rite, a better fate than vainly thus to boast, and fly, the scandal of thy Trojan host. Gods, how the scornful Greeks exult to see their fears of danger undeceived in thee. Thy figure promised with a martial air, but ill thy soul supplies a form so fair. In former days, in all thy gallant pride, when thy tall ships triumphant stemmed the tide, when Greece beheld thy painted canvas flow, and crowds stood wondering at the passing show, say, was it thus, with such a baffled mien, you met the approaches of the Spartan queen? Thus from her realm conveyed the beauteous prize, and both her warlike lords outshined in Helen's eyes. This deed, thy foes' delight, thy own disgrace, thy father's grief, and ruin of thy race. This deed recalls thee to the proffered fight, or hast thou injured whom thou darest not right? Soon to thy cost the field would make thee know thou keep'st the consort of a braver foe. Thy graceful form instilling soft desire, thy curling tresses, and thy silver lyre, beauty and youth, in vain to these you trust. When youth and beauty shall be laid in dust, Troy yet may wake, and one avenging blow crush the dire author of his country's woe. His silence here, with blushes, Paris breaks. 'Tis just, my brother, what your anger speaks, but who like thee can boast a soul sedate, so firmly proof to all the shocks of fate? Thy force, like steel, a tempered hardness shows, still edged to wound, and still untired with blows, like steel, uplifted by some strenuous swain, with falling woods to strew the wasted plain. Thy gifts I praise, nor thou despise the charms with which a lover golden Venus arms. Soft moving speech, and pleasing outward show, no wish can gain them, but the gods bestow. Yet wouldst thou have the proffered combat stand, the Greeks and Trojans seat on either hand, then let a midway space our host divide, and, on that stage of war, the cause be tried. By Paris there the Spartan king be fought, for beauty is Helen and the wealth she brought. And who his rival can in arms subdue? His be the fair, and his the treasure too. Thus with a lasting league your toils may cease, and Troy possess her fertile fields in peace. Thus may the Greeks review their native shore, much famed for generous steeds, for beauty more. He said, the challenge Hector heard with joy, then with his spear restrained the youth of Troy, held by the midst, athwart, and near the foe advanced with steps majestically slow, while round his dauntless head the Grecians pour their stones and arrows in a mingled shower. Then thus the monarch, great Atrides, cried, forbear, ye warriors, lay the darts aside. A parley Hector asks, a message bears. We know him by the various plume he wears. Awed by his high command the Greeks attend, the tumult silence, and the fight suspend, while from the center Hector rolls his eyes on either host, and thus to both applies, hear, all ye Trojan, all ye Grecian bands, what Paris, author of the war, demands. Your shining swords within the sheath restrain, and pitch your lances in the yielding plain. Here in the midst, in either army's sight, he dares the Spartan king to single fight, and wills that Helen and the ravished spoil that cause the contest shall reward the toil. Let these the brave, triumphant victor grace, and different nations part in leagues of peace. He spoke, in still suspense on either side each army stood. The Spartan chief replied, me too, ye warriors, here, whose fatal right a world engages in the toils of fight. To me the labor of the field resign, me Paris injured, all the war be mine. Fall he that must, beneath his rival's arms, and live the rest, secure of future harms. 2 lambs, devoted by your country's right, to earth a sable, to the sun a white, prepare, ye Trojans, while a third we bring select to Jove, the inviolable king. Let reverend Priam in the truce engage, and add the sanction of considerate age. His sons are faithless, headlong in debate, and youth itself an empty, wavering state. Cool age advances, venerably wise, turns on all hands its deep discerning eyes, sees what befell, and what may yet befall, concludes from both, and best provides for all. The nations here with rising hopes possessed, and peaceful prospects dawn in every breast. Within the lines they drew their steeds around, and from their chariots issued on the ground. Next, all unbuckling the rich mail they wore, laid their bright arms along the sable shore. On either side the meeting hosts are seen with lances fixed, and close the space between. Two heralds now, dispatched to Troy, invite the Phrygian monarch to the peaceful rite. Tall Thebes hastens to the fleet to bring the lamb for Jove, the inviolable king. Meantime to beauteous Helen, from the skies the various goddess of the rainbow flies, like fair Lethe in form and face, the loveliest nymph of Priam's royal race. Her in the palace, at her loom she found, the golden web her own sad story crowned. The Trojan war she weaved, herself the prize, and the dire triumphs of her fatal eyes. To whom the goddess of the painted bow, approach and view the wondrous scene below. Each hardy Greek and valiant Trojan knight, so dreadful late and furious for the fight, now rest their spears or lean upon their shields. Ceased is the war, and silent all the fields. Paris alone and Sparta's king advance. Indiana single fight to toss the beamy lance. Each met in arms, the fate of combat tries. Thy love the motive, and thy charms the prize. This said, the many-colored maid inspires her husband's love, and wakes her former fires. Her country, parents, all that once were dear, rush to her thought, and force a tender tear. O'er her fair face a snowy veil she threw, and, softly sighing, from the loom withdrew. Her handmaids, Clymene and Aethra, wait her silent footsteps to the Scaean gate. There sat the seniors of the Trojan race, old Priam's chiefs, and most in Priam's grace. The king the first, Thymoetes at his side, Lampus and Clitius, long in council tried. Panthus and Hystan, once the strong, and next, the wisest of the reverend throng, Antenor grave, and sage Eucaligon, leaned on the walls and basked before the sun. Chiefs, who no more in bloody fights engage, but wise through time, and narrative with age. In summer days, like grasshoppers rejoice, a bloodless race, that send a feeble voice. These, when the Spartan queen approached the tower, in secret owned resistless beauty's power, they cried, no wonder such celestial charms for 9 long years have set the world in arms. What winning graces, what majestic mien, she moves a goddess, and she looks a queen. Yet hence, O heaven, convey that fatal face, and from destruction save the Trojan race. The good old Priam welcomed her, and cried, approach, my child, and grace thy father's side. See on the plain thy Grecian spouse appears, the friends and kindred of thy former years. No crime of thine our present sufferings draws, not thou, but heaven's disposing will, the cause the gods these armies and this force employ. The hostile gods conspire the fate of Troy. But lift thy eyes, and say what Greek is he, far as from hence these aged orbs can see, around whose brow such martial graces shine, so tall, so awful, and almost divine. Though some of larger stature tread the green, none match his grandeur and exalted mien. He seems a monarch, and his country's pride. Thus ceased the king, and thus the fair replied, before thy presence, Father, I appear, with conscious shame and reverential fear. Ah, had I died, ere to these walls I fled, false to my country and my nuptial bed, my brothers, friends, and daughter left behind, false to them all, to Paris only kind. For this I mourn, till grief or dire disease shall waste the form whose fault it was to please. The King of Kings, Atrides, you survey, great in the war, and great in arts of sway, my brother once before my days of shame. And oh, that still he bore a brother's name. With wonder Priam viewed the godlike man, extolled the happy prince, and thus began, O blessed Atrides, born to prosperous fate, successful monarch of a mighty state. How vast thy empire! Of your matchless train, what numbers lost? What numbers yet remain? In Phrygia once were gallant armies known. In ancient time, when Otreus filled the throne, when godlike Mygdon led their troops of horse, and I, to join them, raised the Trojan force. Against the manlike Amazons we stood, and Sangar's stream ran purple with their blood. But far inferior those, in martial grace and strength of numbers, to this Grecian race. This said, once more he viewed the warrior train. What's he, whose arms lie scattered on the plain? Broad is his breast, his shoulders larger spread, though great Atrides overtops his head. Nor yet appear his care, and conduct small. From rank to rank he moves, and orders all. The stately ram thus measures o'er the ground, and, master of the flock, surveys them round. Then Helen thus, whom your discerning eyes have singled out, is Ithacus the wise. A barren island boasts his glorious birth. His fame for wisdom fills the spacious earth. Antenor took the word, and thus began, Myself, O king, have seen that wondrous man when, trusting Jove and hospitable laws, to Troy he came, to plead the Grecian cause. Great Menelaus urged the same request. My house was honored with each royal guest. I knew their persons, and admired their parts, both brave in arms, and both approved in arts. Erect, the Spartan most engaged our view. Ulysses seated, greater reverence drew. When Atreus' son harangued the listening train, just was his sense, and his expression plain, his words succinct, yet full. Without a fault, he spoke no more than just the thing he ought. But when Ulysses rose in thought profound, his modest eyes he fixed upon the ground, as one unskilled or dumb. He seemed to stand, nor raised his head, nor stretched his sceptred hand. But when he speaks, what elocution flows! Soft as the fleeces of descending snows, the copious accents fall, with easy art. Melting they fall, and sink into the heart. Wondering we hear, and fixed in deep surprise, our ears refute the censure of our eyes. The king then asked, as yet the camp he viewed, What chief is that, with giant strength endued, whose brawny shoulders, and whose swelling chest, and lofty stature, far exceed the rest? Ajax the great, the beauteous queen replied, himself a host, the Grecian strength and pride. See, bold Idomeneus superior towers amid yon circle of his Cretan powers, great as a god. I saw him once before, with Menelaus on the Spartan shore. The rest I know, and could in order name all valiant chiefs and men of mighty fame. Yet two are wanting of the numerous train, whom long my eyes have sought, but sought in vain. Castor and Pollux, first in martial force, one bold on foot, and one renowned for horse. My brothers these, the same our native shore. One house contained us, as one mother bore. Perhaps the chiefs, from warlike toils at ease, for distant Troy refused to sail the seas. Perhaps their sword some nobler quarrel draws, ashamed to combat in their sister's cause. So spoke the fair, nor knew her brother's doom, wrapped in the cold embraces of the tomb, adorned with honors in their native shore. Silent they slept, and heard of wars no more. Meantime the heralds, through the crowded town, bring the rich wine and destined victims down. Idaeus arms the golden goblets pressed, who thus the venerable king addressed. Arise, O father of the Trojan state. The nations call, thy joyful people wait to seal the truce and end the dire debate. Paris, thy son, and Sparta's king advance. Indiana measured lists to toss the weighty lance, and who his rival shall in arms subdue, his be the dame, and his the treasure too. Thus with a lasting league our toils may cease, and Troy possess her fertile fields in peace. So shall the Greeks review their native shore, much famed for generous steeds, for beauty more. With grief he heard, and bade the chiefs prepare to join his milk-white coursers to the car. He mounts the seat, Antenor at his side. The gentle steeds through Scia's gates they guide. Next from the car descending on the plain, amid the Grecian host and Trojan train, slow they proceed. The sage Ulysses then arose, and with him rose the king of men. On either side a sacred herald stands, the wine they mix, and on each monarch's hands pour the full urn. Then draws the Grecian lord his cutlass sheathed beside his ponderous sword. From the sign victims crops the curling hair, the heralds parted, and the princes share. Then loudly thus before the attentive bands he calls the gods, and spreads his lifted hands. O first and greatest power, whom all obey, who high on Ida's holy mountain sway, eternal Jove, and you bright orb that roll from east to west, and view from pole to pole, thou Mother Earth, and all ye living floods, infernal furies, and Tartarian gods, who rule the dead, and horrid woes prepare for perjured kings, and all who falsely swear. Hear and be witness, if by Paris slain, great Menelaus press the fatal plain, the dame and treasures let the Trojan keep, and Greece returning plough the watery deep. If by my brother's lance the Trojan bleed, be his the wealth and beauteous dame decreed. The appointed fine let Iliad justly pay, and every age record the signal day. This if the Phrygian shall refuse to yield, arms must revenge, and Mars decide the field. With that the chief the tender victims slew, and in the dust their bleeding bodies threw. The vital spirit issued at the wound, and left the members quivering on the ground. From the same urn they drink the mingled wine, and add libations to the powers divine. While thus their prayers united mount the sky, hear, mighty Jove, and hear, ye gods on high, and may their blood, who first the leak confound, shed like this wine, disdain the thirsty ground. May all their consorts serve promiscuous lust, and all their lust be scattered as the dust. Thus either host their imprecations joined, which Jove refused, and mingled with the wind. The rites now finished, Reverend Priam rose, and thus expressed a heart o'ercharged with woes. Ye Greeks and Trojans, let the chiefs engage, but spare the weakness of my feeble age. In yonder walls that object let me shun, nor view the danger of so dear a son. Whose arm shall conquer, and what prince shall fall? Heaven only knows, for heaven disposes all. This said, the hoary king no longer stayed, but on his car the slaughtered victims laid, then seized the reins his gentle steeds to guide, and drove to Troy, Antenor at his side. Bold Hector and Ulysses now dispose the lists of combat, and the ground enclose. Next to decide, by sacred lots prepare, who first shall launch his pointed spear in air. The people pray with elevated hands, and words like these are heard through all the bands. Immortal Jove, high heaven's superior Lord, on lofty Ida's holy mount adored, who were involved us in this dire debate? O give that author of the war to fate and shades eternal. Let division cease, and joyful nations join in leagues of peace. With eyes averted Hector hastes to turn the lots of fight, and shakes the brazen urn. Then, Paris, thine leaped forth, by fatal chance ordained the first to whirl the weighty lance. Both armies set the combat to survey. Beside each chief his azure armor lay, and round the lists the generous coursers neigh. The beauteous warrior now arrays for fight, in gilded arms magnificently bright. The purple cuishes clasp his thighs around, with flowers adorned, with silver buckles bound. Lycaon's corslet his fair body dressed, braced in and fitted to his softer breast. A radiant baldric, o'er his shoulder tied, sustained the sword that glittered at his side. His youthful face a polished helm o'erspread. The waving horsehair nodded on his head. His figured shield, a shining orb, he takes, and in his hand a pointed javelin shakes. With equal speed and fired by equal charms, the Spartan hero sheathes his limbs and arms. Now round the lists the admiring army stand, with javelins fixed, the Greek and Trojan band. Amidst the dreadful veil, the chiefs advance, all pale with rage, and shake the threatening lance. The Trojan first his shining javelin threw, full on Atrides' ringing shield it flew, nor pierced the brazen orb, but with a bound leaped from the buckler, blunted on the ground. Atrides then his massy lance prepares, in act to throw, but first prefers his prayers. Give me, great Jove, to punish lawless lust, and lay the Trojan gasping in the dust. Destroy the aggressor, aid my righteous cause, avenge the breach of hospitable laws. Let this example future times reclaim, and guard from wrong fair friendship's holy name. He said, in poison air the javelin sent, through Paris' shield the forceful weapon went. His corslet pierces, and his garment rends, and glancing downward, near his flank descends. The wary Trojan, bending from the blow, eludes the death, and disappoints his foe. But fierce Atrides waved his sword, and strook full on his casque. The crested helmet shook, the brittle steel, unfaithful to his hand, broke short, the fragments glittered on the sand. The raging warrior to the spacious skies raised his upbraiding voice and angry eyes. Then is it vain in Jove himself to trust? And is it thus the gods assist the just? When crimes provoke us, heaven success denies. The dart falls harmless, and the falchion flies. Furious he said, and towards the Grecian crew, seized by the crest, the unhappy warrior drew. Struggling he followed, while the embroidered thong that tied his helmet dragged the chief along. Then had his ruin crowned Atrides' joy, but Venus trembled for the Prince of Troy. Unseen she came, and burst the golden band, and left an empty helmet in his hand. The casque, enraged, amidst the Greeks he threw. The Greeks with smiles the polished trophy view. Then, as once more he lifts the deadly dart, in thirst of vengeance, at his rival's heart, the queen of love her favored champion shrouds, for gods can all things, in a veil of clouds. Raised from the field the panting youth she led, and gently laid him on the bridal bed. With pleasing sweets his fainting sense renews, and all the dome perfumes with heavenly dews. Meantime the brightest of the female kind, the matchless Helen, o'er the walls reclined. To her, beset with Trojan beauties, came, in borrowed form, the laughter-loving dame. She seemed an ancient maid, well skilled to cull the snowy fleece and wind the twisted wool. The goddess softly shook her silken vest that shed perfumes, and whispering thus addressed Venus, disguised, inviting Helen to the chamber of Paris. Haste, happy nymph, for thee thy Paris calls, safe from the fight, in yonder lofty walls. Fair as a god, with odors round him spread. He lies, and waits thee on the well-known bed, not like a warrior parted from the foe, but some gay dancer in the public show. She spoke, and Helen's secret soul was moved. She scorned the champion, but the man she loved. Fair Venus' neck, her eyes that sparkled fire, and breast revealed the queen of soft desire. Struck with her presence, straight the lively red forsook her cheek, and trembling, thus she said, "Then is it still thy pleasure to deceive, and woman's frailty always to believe? Say, to new nations must I cross the main, or carry wars to some soft Asian plain? For whom must Helen break her second vow? What other Paris is thy darling now? Left to Atrides, victor in the strife, an odious conquest, and a captive wife. Hence let me sail, and if thy Paris bear my absence ill, let Venus ease his care, a handmaid goddess at his side to wait. Renounce the glories of thy heavenly state. Be fixed for ever to the Trojan shore, his spouse or slave, and mount the skies no more. For me, to lawless love no longer led, I scorn the coward, and detest his bed, else should I merit everlasting shame, and keen reproach from every Phrygian dame. Ill suits it now the joys of love to know, too deep my anguish, and too wild my woe." Venus presenting Helen to Paris. Then thus incensed, the Paphian queen replies, "Obey the power from whom thy glories rise. Should Venus leave thee, every charm must fly, fade from thy cheek, and languish in thy eye. Cease to provoke me, lest I make thee more the world's aversion than their love before. Now the bright prize for which mankind engage, then the sad victim of the public rage." At this, the fairest of her sex obeyed, and veiled her blushes in a silken shade. Unseen and silent, from the train she moves, led by the goddess of the smiles and loves. Arrived, and entered at the palace gate, the maids officious round their mistress wait. Then, all dispersing, various tasks attend, the queen and goddess to the prince ascend. Full in her Paris sight, the queen of love had placed the beauteous progeny of Jove, where, as he viewed her charms, she turned away her glowing eyes, and thus began to say, "Is this the chief, who, lost a sense of shame, late fled the field, and yet survives his fame? Oh, hadst thou died beneath the righteous sword of that brave man whom once I called my lord. The boaster Paris oft desired the day with Sparta's king to meet in single fray. Go now, once more thy rival's rage excite, provoke Atrides, and renew the fight. Yet Helen bids thee stay, lest thou unskilled shouldst fall in easy conquest on the field." The prince replies, "Ah, cease, divinely fair, nor add reproaches to the wounds I bear. This day the foe prevailed by palace power. We yet may vanquish in a happier hour. There want not gods to favor us above, but let the business of our life be love. These softer moments let delights employ, and kind embraces snatch the hasty joy. Not thus I loved thee, when from Sparta's shore my forced, my willing heavenly prize I bore, when first entranced in cranies I lay, mixed with thy soul, and all dissolved away." Thus having spoke, the enamored Phrygian boy rushed to the bed, impatient for the joy. Him Helen followed slow, with bashful charms, and clasped the blooming hero in her arms. While these to love's delicious rapture yield, the stern Atrides rages round the field. So some fell lion whom the woods obey, roars through the desert, and demands his prey. Paris he seeks, impatient to destroy, but seeks in vain along the troops of Troy. Even those had yielded to a foe so brave, the recreant warrior, hateful as the grave. Then speaking thus, the King of Kings arose. Ye Trojans, Dardans, all our generous foes, hear and attest, from heaven with conquest crowned, our brothers' arms the just success have found. Be therefore now the Spartan wealth restored. Let Argive Helen own her lawful lord. The appointed fine let Iliad justly pay, and age to age record this signal day. He ceased, his army's loud applauses rise, and the long shout runs echoing through the skies. Map, title Jurity Intiqua. Book 4. The truce is broken, and the long duel of Troy begins again. Book 4. The breach of the truce. And now Olympus' shining gates unfold. The gods, with Jove, assume their thrones of gold. Immortal Hebe, fresh with bloom divine, the golden goblet crowns with purple wine, while the full bowls flow round. The powers employ their careful eyes on long-contended Troy. When Jove, disposed to tempt Saturnia's spleen, thus wake the fury of his partial queen. Two powers divine the son of Atreus aid, imperial Juno, and the martial maid. But high in heaven they sit, and gaze from far, the tame spectators of his deeds of war. Not thus fair Venus helps her favored knight. The queen of pleasures shares the toils of fight. Each danger wards, and constant in her care, saves in the moment of the last despair. Her act has rescued Paris' forfeit life, though great Atrides gained the glorious strife. Then say, ye powers, what signal issue waits to crown this deed, and finish all the fates? Shall heaven by peace the bleeding kingdom spare, or rouse the furies, and awake the war? Yet, would the gods for human good provide, Atrides soon might gain his beauteous bride. Still Priam's walls and peaceful honors grow, and through his gates the crowding nations flow. Thus while he spoke, the queen of heaven, enraged, and queen of war, in close consult engaged, apart they sit, their deep designs employ, and meditate the future woes of Troy. Those secret angers swelled Minerva's breast, the prudent goddess yet her wrath suppressed. But Juno, impotent of passion, broke her sullen silence, and with fury spoke. Shall then, O tyrant of the ethereal reign, my schemes, my labors, and my hopes be vain? Have I, for this, shook Iliad with alarms, assembled nations, set two worlds in arms, to spread the war? I flew from shore to shore, the immortal coursers scarce the labor bore. At length ripe vengeance o'er their heads impends, but Jove himself the faithless race defends. Loath as thou art to punish lawless lust, not all the gods are partial and unjust. The sire whose thunder shakes the cloudy skies sighs from his inmost soul, and thus replies, O lasting rancor, O insatiate hate, to Phrygia's monarch, and the Phrygian state. What high offense is fire the wife of Jove? Can wretched mortals harm the powers above? That Troy, and Troy's whole race thou wouldst confound, and yon fair structures level with the ground. Haste, leave the skies, fulfill thy stern desire, burst all her gates, and wrap her walls in fire. Let Priam bleed, if yet you thirst for more, bleed all his sons, and Iliad float with gore. To boundless vengeance the wide realm be given, till vast destruction glut the queen of heaven. So let it be, and Jove is peace and joy, when heaven no longer hears the name of Troy. But should this arm prepare to wreak our hate on thy loved realms, whose guilt demands their fate, presume not thou the lifted bolt to stay. Remember Troy, and give the vengeance way. For know, of all the numerous towns that rise beneath the rolling sun and starry skies, which gods have raised, or earth-born men enjoy, None stands so dear to Jove as sacred Troy. No mortals merit more distinguished grace than godlike Priam, or than Priam's race. Still to our name their hecatombs expire, and altars blaze with unextinguished fire. At this the goddess rolled her radiant eyes, then on the thunderer fixed them, and replies, 3 towns are Juno's on the Grecian plains, more dear than all the extended earth contains, Mycenae, Argos, and the Spartan wall. These thou mayst raise, nor I forbid their fall. 'Tis not in me the vengeance to remove, the crime sufficient that they share my love. Of power superior why should I complain? Resent I may, but must resent in vain. Yet some distinction Juno might require, sprung with thyself from one celestial sire, a goddess born, to share the realms above, and styled the consort of the thundering Jove, nor thou a wife and sister's right deny. Let both consent, and both by terms comply. So shall the gods our joint decrees obey, and heaven shall act as we direct the way. See ready Pallas waits thy high commands to raise in arms the Greek and Phrygian bands. Their sudden friendship by her arts may cease, and the proud Trojans first infringe the peace. The sire of men and monarch of the sky the advice approved, and bade Minerva fly, dissolve the league, and all her arts employ to make the breach the faithless act of Troy. Fired with the charge, she headlong urged her flight, and shot like lightning from Olympus' height, as the red comet from Saturnia is sent to fright the nations with a dire portent, a fatal sign to armies on the plain, or trembling sailors on the wintry main. With sweeping glories glides along in air, and shakes the sparkles from its blazing hair. Between both armies thus, in open sight, shot the bright goddess in a trail of light. With eyes erect the gazing hosts admire the power descending, and the heavens on fire. The gods, they cried, the gods this signal sent, and fate now labors with some vast event. Jove seals the league, or bloodier scenes prepares. Jove, the great arbiter of peace and wars. They said, while Pallas through the Trojan throng, in shape immortal, passed disguised along, like bold Laodocus, her course she bent, who from Antenor traced his high descent. Amidst the ranks Lycaon's son she found, the warlike Pandarus, for strength renowned, whose squadrons, led from black Aesepus' flood, with flaming shields and martial circles stood. To him the goddess, Phrygian, canst thou hear a well-timed counsel with a willing ear? What praise were thine, couldst thou direct thy dart, amidst his triumph, to the Spartan's heart? What gifts from Troy, from Paris wouldst thou gain, thy country's foe, the Grecian glory slain? Then seize the occasion, dare the mighty deed, aim at his breast, and may that aim succeed. But first, to speed the shaft, address thy vow to Lycian Phoebus with the silver bow, and swear the firstlings of thy flock to pay, on Zelia's altars, to the god of day. He heard, and madly at the motion pleased, his polished bow with hasty rashness seized. 'Twas formed of horn, and smoothed with artful toil. A mountain goat resigned the shining spoil, who pierced long since beneath his arrows bled. The stately quarry on the cliffs lay dead, and 16 palms his brow's large honor spread. The workmen joined, and shaped the bended horns, and beaten gold each taper point adorns. This by the Greeks unseen, the warrior bends, screened by the shields of his surrounding friends. There meditates the mark, and couching low, fits the sharp arrow to the well-strung bow. One from 100 feathered deaths he chose, fated to wound, and cause of future woes. Then offers vows with hecatombs to crown Apollo's altars in his native town. Now with full force the yielding horn he bends, drawn to an arch, and joins the doubling ends. Close to his breast, he strains the nerve below, till the barbed points approach the circling bow. The impatient weapon whizzes on the wing, sounds the tough horn, and twangs the quivering string. More coming soon.